I went to the New Digital Age session, which was one of the featured sessions. So it actually had this big exhibition hall, and I think there was probably it packed out, and there was probably 600 or 700 people in there.
Wow.
Yeah, and the reason being is that the speakers that were there were Eric Schmidt, who's in the upper echelons of Google's leadership, and then Jared. Oh man, I had his name right here. There it is, Jared Cohen. Yeah, and
with Wired.
No. Jared Cohen is also with Google. He's with a new branch of Google called Google Ideas, and the two of them wrote a book together with the same title, The New Digital Age. And so they were talking about the contents of their book, and the panel or the discussion was moderated by Stephen Levy of Wired magazine. So,
gotcha. Okay.
So all people that I get Wired magazine. I mean, we use Google products. Right. Every single day, right? And love Google products. And so they just had a very interesting conversation about again, the new digital age, but mostly like how is the internet changing and shaping like almost the geopolitical landscape. I mean, they talked about the use of social media in the Arab Spring and how governments are now in Egypt, when the uprising started, the government shut down the internet, right? And to disable people from communicating with each other and organizing riots. Well, now, rather than doing that, because they found that actually caused more trouble, because then people were outraged that you've taken my internet away from me, so that didn't do anything to kind of quell the uprising. They now are being much more subtle, and they're infiltrating social media, and so they're trying to control the message by making use of it. So you have these despotic regimes that are finding out how to leverage social media, and when they see these uprisings begin, rather than just pulling the plug, they are either sending in new accounts, or they're finding ways to manipulate the people that are rising up, and either getting them to calm down or distract them or whatever. So it's very, very fascinating. They told a very interesting story about because they traveled to, I think it was 40 different countries to do their research on this book, and one of them was North Korea. I didn't know that they ended up going there.
Oh, wow.
But so they go into North Korea, and then they said that when it was time to leave, they got on a plane, and the plane was packed with North Korean people, and they were flying into China. And they said the only reason that the North Korean people were on that plane was to spy on them and to listen to their conversations. So they have a plane full of people. 3 or 4 of them are non-North Korean citizens, and then when they get to China, the 4 people disembark, and the plane goes back to North Korea.
Oh my God!
So yeah, I mean, just amazing stories like that. They talked. They shared a story about smartphones in Somalia, and how people there will use the smartphones to alert each other to like gang activity and stuff. But it becomes a big problem, because if you do get caught by the gangs, they'll use your cell phone to like track down your friends and like role play as you and get you
have them meet you at Starbucks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or not. I don't know that
Somalian.
I don't know that Starbucks has gotten to Somalia yet.
Not yet.
And then of course they got into all kinds of like NSA stuff and what is Google doing to protect its users, and they actually got kind of technical at that point, and they talked about like all the different levels of encryption, and so they talked about the different ways that they're pushing back on that data and on government trying to snare it from us and everything like that. But it got really technical. He talked about like encryption levels and stuff like that. They did get into government. They did get into like the different styles of outrage from different countries. So like here in the U.S., right, when the NSA happened and Edward Snowden released his, released all the information about what the government was doing, there was outrage here. And we're seeing the same thing in Germany, where citizens there are actually almost more outraged than us at spying, and the same thing in Brazil. But then in the UK, it comes out that the government's spying, and they're so used to surveillance. Like, I mean, I guess there's something like 12 cameras for every citizen in London. And so like it's just blanketed. So there's no
so you're
level
always being watched.
of outrage, right?
ABW, always be watching.
They talked about it. They also talked about a really interesting concept called what did they call it? Hang on a second. Oh, Balkanization. Mm-hmm. So it's the idea that that different governments worldwide would segment themselves, and the most obvious example of this is Iran. So as the internet becomes more and more prevalent in the world, and as we become more interconnected as as society, and as we just all have access to everybody's information. Mm-hmm. But there are certain governments that don't like that idea that we all have each other's information, and so the country of Iran being the most prominent example of they're trying to experiment with this idea that they would close themselves off from the rest of the world and create their own edited version of the internet in their own country. So it'd almost be like a dark space in the world. And
again, controlling the message.
Again, controlling the message. And so, I mean, Iran's talking about doing that now. I don't know if it would ever come to fruition, but the topic and the way that they were addressing it was like, what if that pervaded the entire global network, in that you have somebody controlling all the data and editing it on a grand scale. And that's the kind of thing that they're trying to protect against, is governments coming in and imposing this kind of stuff on people. And then the other big topic that they got into, which I think this was the most fascinating part of the discussion, was data permanence. And that's the idea that if once you post something online, that it's there forever.
Yeah.
And the quote from Eric Schmidt that kind of emphasizes this is, information is very powerful. It can be both used and misused. And so that's just something to keep in mind, that of course, as much more free market leaning people, we're all about government transparency and openness and accountability, and that's a very good thing. And he talks about that. He talks about how he talked about that, about how there needs to be that openness, there needs to be that accountability. But he also spun it in a cautionary sense of, once data's been released, you can't take it back. And we're seeing some of that pushback with Snowden and with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and all this stuff. Like, if certain information gets out, it can become, there is such thing as national security and stuff like that. But the very cool thing was to hear them talk about how, well, but if you don't have a certain level of transparency and accountability, that's when government starts hiding its corruption because it's embarrassing. And so it's nice to see a company like Google, who gets both praised and criticized on a lot of different levels, talking about the need for accountability when it comes to government and NSA and all these, just the internet in general. So
for the nonprofits that we work with, for the think tanks that we work with, what do you think that they can take away from that moving forward with their communications or marketing? I think,
this is high-level stuff, right? Yeah. And I'm probably not even articulating it. I mean, these guys are paid huge amounts of money to know about this stuff, right? But I think that paying attention to what is happening, everybody pays attention to the NSA, right? It's in the mainstream media, everybody's talking about it, but understanding these global implications of the fact that all of this is coming together, right, at a faster speed than we can probably even comprehend, and the access, again, the topics of data permanence and balkanization, so just the widespread flow of information, understanding how that affects how countries run each other, or how our country is run and how it interacts with each other, and what that means for each personal individual. When we were talking about data permanence, we had the discussions that were had in this session were everything from teenagers posting stupid stuff on the internet and it affecting their ability to get a job in 10 years.
Right.
And they talked about how there's going to be a major political upset in the next 10, 20, 30 years when this generation that's in junior high right now goes to run for office, and people are going to go back.
Every wrong thing they've ever done.
Yeah, people are going to go back and look at their Twitter account and look at their Facebook postings and
And is their message consistent? Have they always believed?
Right. I mean, you think about what happens when a politician right now tweets something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's immediately pinned back on them, right? Well, now you're going to have 20 years of Twitter data to comb through, and the timestamp isn't going to matter, right? Like, everything is immediate because, you know, what they said in immaturity in junior high will be permanently affixed to them when they're 35 and running for U.S. senator or even city council, right? Like, so, you know, these are things that people need to keep in view, and so even more so, you know, the nonprofits that we work with have to think about, especially this idea of data permanence. Like, think about what you are posting and thinking about how it represents your brand, and thinking about, you know, you may be addressing an issue in this direction now, but how does that evolve in 10 years? And so just keeping in mind that, again, the internet is a very powerful tool. It can be used well, and it can be misused. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that we need, that nonprofits and that Spark Freedom can take away from this. And there was another really quick anecdote I want to share, just because it got me really jazzed up, and it's already been reported on blogs all across the internet. But Eric Schmidt was talking about just about capitalism in general. Google has come under fire somewhat for how it treats its employees, and there's been some pushback in the San Francisco area because just all the tech groups there have caused the cost, or have made the cost of living rise so high because the salaries are so high.
Right.
So they buy up all the houses, and they can afford.
Nobody else can afford to live there.
Yeah, nobody else can afford to live there, and so there's been pushback. But he's just talking about the idea of capitalism, and he was referencing WhatsApp and the fact that they got acquired by Facebook for $19 billion, and it's 50 people, right? And he said, we need to celebrate capitalism. I mean, look at what these people were able to accomplish. Look at the fact that Facebook, they saw what they were doing. These 50 people were created this app, and Facebook valued that at $19 billion and paid them out for that. Good for them was his quote. You know, we got to celebrate capitalism. And I think, you know, we talked about this a little bit before we went on air. It's so interesting to be at South by Southwest. One of the most fascinating things about this place is that you have people like Eric Schmidt and plenty of others. You know, Mark Cuban's going to be here tomorrow, right? So there's all these, you know, millionaire and billionaire business people who, you know, who come here and talk about their corporate culture and how they've succeeded and the value that they brought to the marketplace and stuff like that. And we'll say things like, we need to celebrate capitalism. And then you'll also have other people here who are very much about social change and probably are very anti-capitalist. And so it's just very, but we're all
curious mixture.
But we're all here about innovation and about new ideas and about, you know, being pushing the ball forward and being inspired. And so you see people from across the spectrum coming to South by Southwest to share this. So anyway, it was a fascinating session. I could probably talk about even more of it. And again, there was so many ideas in there that I can't even accurately reciprocate, but still very, very cool.